someone, and that's as specific as I'd like to get, hope I haven't given an identity away, that came in the comments the other day and said, hey, you're misleading the audience when you say that you're doing every conference, but you don't do the G5s. So let me just state this clearly for the future record. Unless otherwise noted, we will not be talking about G5 conferences on the show in preview format. You have told me not to do it. You guys have told me. So if there was this huge rush of demand for Sunbelt content, we'd be pumping it out. I format the show for you, not for myself. I could talk about ULL all night. I wouldn't have a problem with that. You guys have told me at about a 20-to-1 click-through ratio, you care about the Power 5 content, therefore that's why we go down these roads. So here we go. Biggest questions in all the Power 5 conferences. This is the beginning of this list. It's certainly not going to be a conclusive list. Let's start in the ACC. And you can answer these right along with me, and some of you are going to answer these pretty quick. Is there anyone who's ready to jump up and bite Clemson? Could be North Carolina. Could be, surprisingly, Virginia Tech. Maybe Virginia, Florida State, Miami. But I'm not talking collectively. You don't get to field an all-star team. You don't get to take Phil Dracovic from Boston College. You don't get to take the linebacker core from here and the wide receiver core from there. It would be fascinating and may still end up the same way, sadly. But I want to know, is there one team out there? Now, you would obviously lean North Carolina in the preseason. I would too, as giving one unit the best chance at maybe dethroning Clemson. I think it's been 6 years in a row now for the Tigers. But I just want to know, right now, there's common sense and then there's reality. So common sense would tell you if you got a conference where I think the number's 13 of 14 starting quarterbacks are returning, and the one that's not is Clemson, which will preseason be, I would assume, the all-ACC quarterback in DJ Uiagalelei. So the other one, every single program. I mean, that's one point. The other point is every single program has got a returning quarterback. So what that would indicate to you, also, you've been beat on for like over half a decade by the same team. That would indicate to you it's probably time. That's what common sense would tell you. But then you zoom in and you try and find where it's actually going to happen. It's hard. Now, North Carolina doesn't play Clemson in the regular season. So if that were to happen, it wouldn't happen until the end of the year. But I really wonder if you've got an answer better than North Carolina. Is it going to be Miami? Is Florida State going to shock people this year? It's crazier things have happened, but you're going to be dealing from a roster deficit if you do it. And you're not going to be doing it in a year like maybe 2017, where Kelly Bryant was the quarterback there. They still made it to the playoff, but that's a more vulnerable Clemson team. You can talk all you want to about the inexperience of DJ Uiagalelei. I'll tell you what, I'll take my chances betting on him if you want to take your chances betting with me against him. I'd be happy to play that role. What about in the SEC? I want to talk about two of them, Texas A&M and Georgia. I call it the springboard model, basically. It's where you've already got a really good program. You already got a really good team. They are accomplished. You're sending guys to the league. And so in a lot of ways, a fan of maybe an inferior program would look at you as one of the standards, one of the models with which their program would hopefully follow. But that doesn't mean that's how they feel in College Station or in Athens. Now, these are not mirror image programs. And in fact, I would argue they're at different stages. But yet, same question remains. At Texas A&M, you may look at them and say, good for you guys. You almost made the playoff last year. Well, they just said we didn't make the playoff. And you may look at them and say, good job, guys. You're like a top 6, top 7 caliber program right now. And they're looking at you and saying, you know who else is over here? You see him? You see him over there? Yeah, we're looking to the west, I guess. Camera east. Is that camera east, stage east, or stage west? Well, there's this crimson gorilla, 500-pound, that sits in the corner of our room constantly, and its name is Alabama. So it doesn't really matter if we're the 7th best team in the country. If they're number 1, I mean, all due respect, we're paying our head coach this much money, and we're recruiting this many good players, and our stadium seats this many people, and our facilities are this nice. There is no hamstring that's pulled around here in terms of resource, and so we expect to be able to compete, and it's nice. It's a good story if we're number 7. We want to be higher than that. Number 7 may not be good enough. So how do you springboard is the question. The answer is offense. It's pretty simple. Defensively, they've gotten where they need to be. They've recruited, they've developed, and they got the right staff in place. They've been able to keep that staff around. It's offense. I mean, that's it. And that's why there's so much focus being paid to guys like Haynes King, because that's really the only way you can springboard. At Georgia, what's the only way they can really springboard there? What else can they accomplish? Win the SEC East? They've done it. Win the SEC championship? They've done it. Win a playoff game? They've done it. The only thing left, the only box left to check is national championship. And I want you to imagine walking in the shoes of Kirby Smart. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for him, nor would you even if I did. But imagine entering every year, especially knowing the history of the program. Hadn't won a championship in several generations, and yet knowing full well when you kick it off week 1 in September, if this doesn't end in a national championship win, there's going to be a large chunk of that little pie chart of my fan base that's going to be upset with me. How do you springboard? How do you clear that final hurdle? It's quarterback. It's offense. It's not hard to figure out. It's maybe a lot harder to execute. It's not hard to figure out. In the Big Ten, we have to ask the question about Jim Harbaugh. We've been asking it. About Scott Frost, it's now time to ask it. We're not 1 year in anymore. We're several years in now. We got to ask, are the doubters going to vanish or are they going to be validated? Because the doubters are there, and I don't really even need to recap what they say about Nebraska or what they say about Michigan, but 2020 sure will reveal a lot in this conference. You could say that about every team. I think one of the more overused phrases in college football preview magazine season is, this is an important year for so-and-so. This is a pivotal year. I got a breaking news. We should have had a graphic. I got breaking news for everyone. It's always an important year. No one ever does this pro bono. No one ever goes to war on Saturday for charity. It's an important year for everyone. It's a pivotal year for everyone. Now, if we want to categorize it, some more than others, Scott Frost feels a little bit differently right now than, let's say, Nick Saban does. Yes, we can grant ourselves that. What do the doubters say? The doubters say, Scott Frost, maybe he wasn't the right guy for the job. I think that's pretty short-sighted. I think the scarier version of the doubter is the one who says, well, Scott Frost proved he can coach and build a program. It's not like we haven't seen him do it. We didn't pull him up from being a coordinator at the high school level and just plop him in the head man's chair at Nebraska. What if the reality here is no one's capable of doing it anymore? I refuse to believe that, by the way. I think maybe it may take longer to do it at Nebraska, but it doesn't really matter what I think, because if what I think is not attached to reality, I could just be wrong. Has happened before, probably will happen again. The biggest fear in Lincoln, Nebraska, and surrounding areas, of course, is what if the doubters are right? What if they're validated this year? So fingers crossed for every fan of college football, essentially. The V word that happens there is vanish. The doubters vanish. They're not validated. Now, at Michigan, this has obviously been several more years in the making, and it's a lot higher profile of story. But are the doubters right there? The doubters around Jim Harbaugh, again, not to rehash things that we talked about 1,000 times, but it's just, we thought we had one thing when we hired him. The game was pivoting kind of simultaneous to us hiring him. And you look at Michigan's record and their success, relatively speaking, under Jim Harbaugh. 2015, 10 wins. 2016, 10 wins. I remember sitting in the press box at Bryant-Denny Stadium watching what I thought was about to be a seminal moment. A win for Michigan over Ohio State. You guys remember how that game ended? They're still arguing about it, but things were never the same after that. I got a Michigan buddy back home that would swear to you the entire tide of that rivalry and therefore the future trajectory of the Michigan program forever changed for the worse that day. And if you look at the evidence on your screen right now, if you're watching, after that, it kind of bears it out. Now, I don't know what to make of 2020. It would be hypocritical for me to make excuses conveniently for the programs that I believe in, like Penn State or even LSU, and not afford Jim Harbaugh the same excuses. That's really what they are. We all understand that. So I'm willing to push aside 2020. I'm willing to do that. Jim Harbaugh has not been a disaster there. It's all about standard and expectation. The fact of the matter is, if we were to have taken Michigan's results and we put them at Purdue, they'd be thrilled. This is not Purdue, this is Michigan. And so the doubters say, he's good, and that's where it ends. By today's standards, he is a good head coach. Not elite, not top caliber, certainly not good enough to overtake Ohio State, get us in the playoff mix. So are they going to vanish, those doubters, or are they going to be validated? In the Big 12, it's really simple for me. Is Oklahoma's defense ready to win a championship? Because to me, this is kind of the Georgia of the Big 12. There's nothing else to talk about here. With Oklahoma, there's nothing else to talk about. because they've also done it all. Can they win the big rivalry games? When do they not? Can they go to the Big 12 championship game and win it? Yeah. Can they make the playoff? Yeah. So that's where their holdup's been. They got a couple of blowout losses, and then they got one overtime loss, instant classic in the Rose Bowl. But the question has always revolved around defense. Until we can play X caliber of defense, we will not be able to achieve Y. I think they got the Excalibur defense, not Excalibur, Excalibur defense now. I think they can accomplish Y. But again, doesn't matter what I think in some random studio in Nashville in May. It matters what Alex Grinch and those kids he's recruited, matters what they can do when they tee it up in September. But my point with Oklahoma is now, whereas a lot of you are still going to have to see it to believe it, I think it's there. Just like the ingredients have to be in the kitchen before the meal's made. If the ingredients are there, the meal's capable of being made, you still got to go make it. They got the ingredients now. When you watch them, I'll tell you the first thing that'll stand out. If you have not watched Oklahoma closely, you watch them closely first few weeks of the year. If they got questions on defense, it won't be up front anymore. You won't see them being blown off the ball. You won't see folks gash them for 8 yards per carry on the ground. Those days are gone. You may be able to throw on them early in the year before they get things settled in. I think they eventually will get things settled in on the back end of that defense too. They're going to be a championship caliber product, both sides of that ball, for the first time since Lincoln Riley's been there by the end of the year when it counts the most. And in the Pac-12, let's gather ourselves and let's pack up and let's head out west. I'm not going to sing a Kid Rock song, but I do want to ask this. Everyone's excited about the Pac-12 having a new commissioner. Everyone's excited in Eugene about Oregon's prospect for maybe contending for, let's say, a playoff spot. And I am too. But in the Pac-12, the issue out there has been USC. USC has been the issue. This is me pausing so we can change the lower third so I can make it look good when we cut it up afterwards. And no. Okay, so there we go. In the Pac-12, it's all on USC. The fact of the matter, and they know it out west, even though a lot of them don't want to say it out loud. In the Pac-12, it's USC, and then it's everyone else. I don't mean they're the only one that can win. I don't mean they're the only one that's competitive or take football seriously. In fact, I would argue there are entities out there recruiting at a higher level than them and taking football more seriously than them. What I mean is, if you want to save the Pac-12, if you want to resurrect the profile of that conference, you can't do it without Southern Cal. Mario Cristobal and the folks at Oregon can perform at as high a level as they possibly can. Washington can do it. Arizona State can do it. You're not collectively resurrecting the brand, the Pac-12 brand, until USC gets it right. And that's on Clay Helton. I mean, that's on his staff. I look at their offensive line. I look at the inconsistency at quarterback. You talk about names all you want to. I don't care about names. I care about production. You can have stars next to your name. You can have all the preseason magazine accolades you want to. They turn the ball over too much. They throw the ball to the other team too much. You saw it happen in the Pac-12 championship game. We sat right at this desk. Turnovers are not supposed to be predictable. We sat right here and said, hey, USC, they hadn't turned the ball over a whole lot this year. They've benefited from a lot of turnover games. It's freakish. It's random. They'll turn it over against Oregon. This thing will correct itself. It'll kind of draw back to the norm. And what do you know? It did. And Oregon, I think they were a point spread underdog, went and won the Pac-12 championship game, a game they weren't even supposed to be playing in. So I say all that to say I don't have a ton of brimming confidence about the mixture and the collection they have at USC. I hope I'm wrong because I love to see all the big programs succeed, but I'd certainly love to see this conference come back to what we know it's capable of. It hasn't been 40 years ago, guys. It's only been about a decade and a half that, in a lot of ways, the attention of the nation was focused on the Pac-12. Kind of first and foremost because the alpha program in America was Southern Cal, and so everyone else had to really work off of what they were doing out there. So fingers crossed for the Pac-12 and several fingers crossed. You know that thing where you kind of, there we go, cross all four of them? That's me right now when we're talking Southern Cal.